I want to check out some of the claims, because I have a suspicion things aren't what they seem about those tariffs. Never type right, guys. So what factories have shut down in China due to the tariffs of the United States? So there have been many reports of Chinese factories reducing production, furloughing workers, or temporary closing, but there is not a comprehensive, verified list of factories that were permanently shut down because of U.S. tariffs. The reason is frustratingly, I don't care what that says. Numerous export-oriented toy manufacturers reportedly suspended production or closed out the U.S. orders very sharply following the 2025 tariff increases. Alright, so toy companies. Several exports either shut down production lines or shifted orders to Vietnam, Indonesia, and Mexico. Furniture manufacturers did that. Apparel and textile factories electronic suppliers serving U.S. consumer electronics brands reduced shifts or relocated production in Southeast Asia rather than permanently closing. Christmas decoration and seasonal good manufacturers. So in other words, there's reduced production and worker layoffs and companies relocating production. Now, tariffs have gone up around the United States much higher than usual, so this bottom part doesn't even matter. Because a lot of people can't even import from Europe, Germany, and other countries, France, other countries like that. They have to charge higher tariffs to import that stuff. That sounds what I'm getting out of this, what I'm picturing, and why I've created this video is because it sounds as if this is a problem between United States and the world, Europe, China especially, but I don't have any information, and it's hard to research this because you could have debates on both sides whether Europe is affected or unaffected by the tariffs of the United States or the production in China. Section 230, Google would, most cases they would say that they are affecting Europe. So, if U.S. Let me try to tell you what I'm seeing here. It sounds like to me that how do we know that the relationship between the United States and China, that's tariffs isolated to only them, production and all this. If it was about production loss and factories closing down, companies shutting down, then especially if it was unexpectedly from a tariff by a president, you would expect the prices to increase in other countries like Europe. Um, you could search for that, and there's going to be people to say, well, it does affect Europe, or it doesn't affect Europe. Um, you would make a debate about which one is is true, and people would put that in political sphere of, well, if you're saying that it does affect Europe, then you're siding with conservatives. If it doesn't, you're siding with well, it wouldn't just be liberals; it would also be libertarians and such. Um, so I find it very unreliable to actually try to research that because you're going to get on both sides. So that makes it extremely difficult for us, for people in America, to cross-reference that information. But what I would suspect equally, probably even more, most likely, is that China, I mentioned this before in a previous video, is that China, they're not transparent with the rules they're about to come out with about reductions. It's not like the United States. It's not transparent in that way, in that manner. The government, they can have plans months in advance, even years, and reductions and in other words, I'm trying to say that they're expecting production loss to happen to the United States. So they're going to reduce those by closing down the factories, reducing labor force because the world doesn't need that extra labor. On the flip side of that, the outcome is the same. The United States gets booted out of the global economic system. So Europe would be the deciding factor of that, but it could lean both ways. The only people who would know that would be, the National Security Council in Congress, which would have that information that isn't transparent or available to the United States, even to the United States government or the American population, because it's a closed circuit that the Chinese government does not publicly release that information. So, but the danger in that is that either the United States is influencing China through tariffs and all this, or it's Chinese decisions where we can allow ourselves to do a tariff, where in that case, that the extra charges that Americans have to pay in taxes is just a tax because we don't have the influence that we say we do. You see the problem with that. So we're living in our own little bubble, and we're not seeing the full reality. There is the younger generation, the older generation, the boomers. You could say, well, that's obvious been going on, where we can do that. It manipulates, or you're manipulating the population. That might have worked during the Cold War. That might have worked during the 80s. But, with the internet age and everyone asking these questions, the younger generation saying, if we see this, they're going to be upset. They're going to question that. Ignorance isn't an excuse, but you have to be charged with your ignorance regardless. So, yeah, it's just, when I was Googling, let's continue to read this so we can go to Europe. Many Chinese firms kept their headquarters in some manufacturing in China while moving only U.S.-bound production elsewhere to avoid tariffs. So, based on that statement alone, it sounds like, and I know it comes from Wikipedia, but it's like what I've been saying. It's only affecting U.S.-bound production to avoid tariffs. of the United States, but outside of that, it's only the United States putting the pressure on them. But at the same time, like, what's the truth here? What's the reality? Is it we're being influenced by their decisions that just happen to come? Like, we know it's about to happen, so we keep a tariff where, like, 2 weeks later, then they start shutting down these factories. Not in response, but we were the response to them. So they're influencing us to do a tariff, to make ourselves look like we're actually in charge. And I feel like that's misleading. It's misdirection and full of lies. No truth in that. Um, I, 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 I just can't get down with that. It says the broader economic effects have included weaker exports to the United States in several sectors, though China has offset part of the impact by increasing exports to other markets and through government support measures. China's economy has therefore slowed in some export industries without experiencing a nationwide collapse of manufacturing. In short, if you're asking whether factories in China have been affected by U.S. tariffs, the answer is yes. If you're asking for a verified list of named factories that permanently shut down and solely because of those tariffs, the list is surprisingly short because its closures usually result from a combination of tariffs. So in other words, you have no proof. So you just question, you add me to question what you just said about whether factories in China have been affected by U.S. tariffs. The answer is yes. That's in bolded letters. If you're asking for a verified list of named factories that permanently shut down solely because of those tariffs, the list is surprisingly short because closures usually result from a combination of tariffs, declining demand, higher costs, and companies shifting production abroad. Now, could you also say that the government has made it where they knew what would happen with the United States and their response to it? I feel like that's not going to be answered because of how U.S. law is, Section 230, and giving America the shining light of what we're doing is always what is actually going on. Living in a delusion to reality. The global supply chain is less like a light switch and more like a bucket brigade where everyone keeps moving the buckets to a different country. Yeah, but you're not seeing those price increases in other markets like in Europe, for example. And speaking of Europe, and I wanted to read that so I could talk about this. I was Googling the tariffs, if any tariffs were happening or any effect was happening in Europe. And the only thing that I was able to see was electric cars being manufactured and those tariffs on electric cars. Now, in that particular case, I think it's a little bit more straightforward. Now, I'm speculating here, presumably, that this, I'm guessing the word you would use is turnkey, because what's going on, I can imagine that China has some sort of production which lets it be modular, where if you're like creating an electric car, you're no longer creating an electric car, you can use those materials and resources to build something else. In this particular case, it would be e-bikes. I would assume that it would be e-bikes. You want to raise your e-bike supplies and demand and increase those production, so you import them to Europe. Because in Europe, e-bikes are rising, and they can have their reasons, environmental reasons, or cars might be more difficult to recycle or get rid of compared to electric bikes. Landfills of those batteries. I don't know if that's the case here, but I do think that resources in manufacturing from electric cars can go into electric bikes. And that's a very straight can get. In America, it seems that if there is a government, if Chinese government is not being transparent, then America is reflecting on this and copying and hiding their transparency through mass transparency happening elsewhere. And That's what I would. That's what it looks like to me. That's happening here. Um. So, what are the tariffs that Europe has? Just reading through here. One important point is that tariffs are only one part of the EU trade product. The EU also relies heavily on product safety standards and environmental regulations. Trade. It's interesting. The EU also has free trade agreements with dozens of countries, including Canada, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, United Kingdom, many countries in Africa, Latin America, and the Mediterranean. So, in other words, you don't have a trade agreement with the United States. Um, Now that's coming from their side. That's them putting on us. So you don't have any relationship with the United States. All right, so that adds another big thing that the United States is being reduced out of the global economy. All right, so that has always been a rule. I'd imagine that's been a rule for a very, very long time since the EU was created, probably. Um, and we're just seeing the real life, the day to day stuff coming out of China. Um, I have to infer a lot of things in here. Um, but I'd imagine that would be the case. So, what are the tariffs mainly directly towards regarding China at this point in time? I should have said Europe. Well, United States also has electric vehicles as well, electric cars. Same thing as Europe. The goal is to prevent domestic automakers and prevent heavily subsidized Chinese EVs from dominating the U.S. market. Um, I mean, you got e-bikes, you got solar panels, you got electric cars. I mean, I think e-bikes are slipping through the cracks, but they're like a good kind of crack. It's like I don't even know what you would even say about that, but I think it's found a way that they can go mass popular. And there were so many manufacturers. Well, there's many factories in China for that, and there's also many companies. They are doing drop shipping. Now they do got different designs here and there, but there are some companies that are even based in China that want to get a piece of that, a huge part of that market in the United States. And I think that e-bikes are definitely, they found their way through there without any regulation. Now, I mean, e-bikes are becoming popular. They're cheaper than cars. Go nowadays they go 50 to 80 miles. I mean, 10 years ago, an e-bike couldn't even travel 10 miles on a single charge. So now they cost about the same as they used to. They might be a little cheaper now, but for the uh, amount of battery you get, definitely a big change. I mean, you can ride a bike that used to take 30 minutes to an hour. Now you can ride a bike for like 3 to 5 hours on a single charge. I mean, the e-bike I got now, it has um, I mean, the battery charging sucks. It's 7 hours, but I think you get like, depending on if I'm really pushing it, I can do like 3 hours on like maximum everything, throttle, assist, all that. 3 hours. Um, Maybe 5 to 7 hours if I have it on lowest. Um, Batteries and battery materials, lithium-ion batteries, battery components, printer imports are major focus because they are essential for EVs, energy storage, and defense. Um, that's not entirely true. The battery, I don't know how the battery tariffs are working, but I do know that they're actually reduced now because companies like EcoFlow, they do a ton of discounts all throughout the year. I mean, they got a discount right now. So I don't know if they're exempt or what has happened, but there's not, you're just not seeing the price increase as you would expect. It's all towards electric vehicles. Again, I do think that the United States does do shady business. It's not honest. And it's, yeah, I mean, I would much rather look at the trading between Europe and China as much more trustworthy than anything that the United States is doing. Yeah, I'm just not seeing these prices. It's talking about solar panels. I mean, that stuff is getting cheaper. It's not getting more expensive. It's interesting that toys were on the list. Toys. I don't know what. I mean, I know corporate Mattel. You got Mattel, Hasbro. But I don't know what brands are being targeted there. I couldn't tell you. Um, but I do. But I do see that there is something going on here going in the United States. Um, okay, so I'm reading. Take U.S. manufacturing, reduce dependence on Chinese supply chains, slow China's technological investment in strategically important industries. That wouldn't change anything. China gets its what they do is Apple, Microsoft, and all them. They send their design blueprints and all that to China. Everyone does this. Even the U.S. government does this. They send it to China where they can produce it. So it doesn't slow China's technological advancement when we give them the blueprints to all this. That's a bunch of nonsense right there. Address concerns over subsidies, intellectual property, and again, it doesn't apply here. Um, yeah, it says that one interesting shift is that tariffs today are increasingly focused on high value strategic industries such as chips, batteries, EVs, clean energy, and equipment. That's bullshit. Those things aren't changing. Chips, there's probably a little arbitrage going on over there. I mean, Nvidia, that's a whole bucket of worms. But batteries, clean energy, that stuff isn't changing price. They're not going up in price or down in price overall, but they are staying at a stable, constant rate. Um, it just isn't there. I said, I mean, in regards in European tariffs, what are the highest in that in a sentence? That's a weird way of saying that. Um, yeah, it doesn't say um, electric vehicles, but I did see that. If we go to Google, yeah, cars and car parts. That's what it says here. Um, Why isn't the war retaliating against U.S. tariffs? Partly because the U.S. tariffs do not apply to anyone else besides the U.S. It's a tax because you're not getting the influence that you claim you have. Trump threatens 100% tariffs on European countries. That's fine, but it doesn't affect China. I mean, Europe can still do business with China, Iran, all these Middle Eastern countries, Canada. The United States, it, it just doesn't make... It makes sense from a political view, but if you see beyond the politics, you'll be like, this has nothing to do with anything. On digital service taxes. It says the EU's restraint in response to Trump's tariffs is responsible for removing the face of provocation. You don't even have to do it because there's no... If this was a thing done by China in advance and the tariffs just make it look like the United States has influence over China instead of the other way around, then why would Europe get involved? Why would the EU get involved? You wouldn't. The current clash between China and Europe. European tariffs by cutting off key... See, when you read stuff like this is all geared to an American audience. Everything you see on Google, IP address, all that, it's just geared to a European audience. I mean, American audience, not a European one. In Europe, you might see other stuff. Because what I'm seeing here is between the United States and Europe. That's what I'm saying here. It says, I said tariffs Europe. Now this does mention China and Europe here, but most of this is about Trump, United States, Europe. Okay? The algorithm is doing that. That's section 230 for you. And happening right before our eyes. Yeah, EV tariffs are the highest, 17% at 35. That's the AI thing. That could be true. That could not be true. I don't know. I'm just going over the information and really diagnosing everything, trying to give an overview. Yeah. EV electric vehicles are at the prime. But again, if you're targeting the electric car manufacturing, then you could have a solution to take all that and turn them into e-bikes. Europe would benefit from that. From the United States perspective, this is just a tax on people. I mean, I know that liberals and Democrats have said, well, it's a tax on the American public. But I think that it's bigger than just that. It's more than that. It's that we don't have information from China about were they really responding to this, or is this just what we're saying that they've responded to this because no one else is allowed to tell us what is going on in this country. It's manipulating public perception. And like I said, people watching videos like this, or the younger generations, they're gonna start putting things together like this, and I'm surprised that a channel like mine hasn't existed in the last 10 or 15 years, because we've had the internet for a while. It's just now I don't know what it's about because we still have the same information we had before, but it's the way that we are interacting with information that is changing. I found that very interesting. Why now? Why is it happening now? More people are on the internet. Even if you're not political, you can still stumble upon this information and come across this stuff and not even be political and still come with the same conclusion as someone who is political. What do you guys think? I'm I'm gonna call BS on the U.S. tariffs. BS that it's created an unexpected change and that change is not being sent as a price increase to Europe. No one's talking about that. I'm gonna just say it's bullshit. Um, I'm gonna say that the United States is being influenced by China, and Trump just happens to be. And I'll mention something else too. Calgary, when they did the Iron Dome, what was it? Is it the Iron Dome? I meant to put on. I meant to send that to Google. Oh, the Golden Dome. That's what it's called. So this is over Calgary, and when Trump announced this and said that Calgary could become part of the United States, there were many people in Calgary who supported that. But here's my question: how would a U.S. president just happen to pick that one out of all of them, pick that one, and then defend it with this Golden Dome? You wouldn't know that. A president wouldn't know that. And they wouldn't be able to get it precise. You know, there has to be. He's getting information from like the CIA, the NSC, telling him these things. Because how else would he know? A president wouldn't know that information. Not, not with evidence. A hunch maybe, but not with any solid evidence to move a government where they won't say, oh, well, we're going to riot and be so precise where most people on that side than against it. I just find that questionable, very suspicious. Yeah, and Trump has a lot of that going on. With the U.S. tariffs, it just happens to be Calgary. Just happens to be the DAA, CIA, Columbia nightclub raid that happened. They were deported by Columbia, and no one had a problem with this. People say it was Trump was the president. He gets the credit. Well, people are going to start pulling all those things together, pulling those things apart, putting them together and putting them apart. And they're going to start questioning, well, why do we need the U.S. president for if he's just taking the credit for all these other agencies doing? Yeah, you're going to get sent to the frying pan. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's not the Cold War and it's not the 1980s anymore. Eventually, people are going to find out the truth. People are going to put things together. The younger generations are going to be like, what do we need you for? Yeah. The Iron Dome is over the Golden Dome is based on the Iron Dome, which is in Israel. You probably heard about it. The drones and missile defense and all that. And you wouldn't be building something like this unless you were afraid of being destroyed, unless you knew you were going to be attacked eventually. But if you're telling everyone that you're going to be attacked, eventually you want to build something for that, well, chances are it's never going to get built, and you're going to lose. That's what's going to happen. Because everyone sees it. Everyone else sees it too. I mean, foreign nations have access to this information. I mean, it's not public. I mean, it's not private. I'm tripping on my words here. I'm sorry. Um, I just see problems, and you could say, well, the United States does this for free speech or having people have debates, have political debates. You know, it gives us a foundation for a government, democracy. You could say all that. You say that encourages all that. You can say that's part of the American culture. But here's the thing, guys. When other people see that about us on the outside, they don't see that as smart. They see that as stupid. They see that as cluelessness. That works if it's all internal. But if you're trying to claim that you're influencing global countries and you're not, you know, the United States has tried that. You know, they've tried it with 1920s. You know, with the margins, they loaned out money. You know, it's said that America is one of the biggest contributors to the Great Depression all around the world because it was sending out these loans. And it always tried to be this big thing, and it never caught on. It was never... America before World War II, and I've mentioned this before, it was never on people's radar. It was just that place people go to. It wasn't something that was influential. It wasn't somewhere it just changes the world. I mean, that didn't happen until after World War II, and a lot of propaganda and politics that took place in the 90s. But all that is BS, guys. All of it. And people are... I don't know when people are going to wake up, but I can tell you that it's going to happen within the next 6 years, especially with YouTube channels like mine. You know, I might be the first person. You know, I might be like one of those Russians who are making videos about their country saying, well, this is what Russia is doing, and then does more and more of them have popped up since the Ukraine war started. You know, and same thing could be happening here, where eventually it's like, why, guys? Why are we keeping this together? So we're all moving together with the global world. That's just human nature. We're just all interconnected, and we're just... I mean, some say it's a hive mind, and perhaps it is, but the general consensus is that we're moving in this direction globally. It's not an internal thing. Yeah, times are... But if you didn't have the people, like conservatives or Democrats or people in politics, well, it would just suddenly collapse in one day. But still, it's just... The time is coming to an end. It's coming to an end. The writing is on the wall for me. I mean... It just... It's being pulled apart. But it's not a political thing. It's not something you vote for. It's just something that's happening because of the state of the world. Everything, you know, people's minds, how they interact with information. I can't explain it. Maybe someone else better can. But it's just, all these things happening is not isolated just to the United States or just isolated to me and this channel. It's happening all over the world. And yeah, I mean, I know conservatives who talk to me and they say, well, why am I not on Facebook much anymore? I said, I don't really want to be on Facebook anymore. And I said, there's so much stuff on there, you know, the politics. And before I said the politic thing, they said, I don't like using people's real pronouns. I like to say they or them. Um, it's just a privacy thing. Um, they said, well, is it because people are trolling you for the stuff you post online? And I'm like, no. In fact, um, a lot of I like people on my YouTube because they don't. There are people who have discussions, but no one's ever mean to me, or no one says you're stupid, no one says you're dumb, delusional, and all this. A lot of people do agree. Um, there's a few of YouTube who don't agree, who say I am delusional and all this. But then they watch some of the videos, like my Charlie Kirk video, and they're like, it's not bad. They like it. They understand it. Now, deep heart conservatives, they don't like that. And I'm sure that deep heart liberals and Democrats won't like it either. But that's the thing. It's people tend to be more respectful on this channel than anywhere else. And I'm sure that there are people who would say, well, that's not possible, or, because they live in their mind of everyone is going to be political these days, left or right. But on this channel, I don't know, maybe it's the content that pulls people out and creates a more neutral audience. But, it's not brutal. I don't delete any comments, and people don't really post much on my YouTube channel, but there's nothing that's been negative. A lot of them have been questions. You can look through the comment sections if you want. But yeah, most of the time I don't have problems with talking to people. Now online in other platforms it's a little different. Like if I'm talking to someone and they don't understand, or they say that there's already, it used to be really bad when I was first starting all of this. It's kind of gotten better over the years because I've learned how to talk with AI and have like these. Oh, it's my way of presenting information. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of respect that goes on this channel than you typically find elsewhere. And people aren't just agreeing. People aren't making comments saying, "Oh well, I agree with this. Yeah, this is going on." I like that. Um, we have like Marlboro. I don't want Marlboro on my channel. I don't like people agreeing just because they like what I say. Or I don't like people agreeing with me just because of what I say. Like Charlie Kirk, for example, people liked his debates. People liked how he was doing what he was doing. But on the other side of that was, if he was in a foreign country, he would be shot on sight. His head would be cut off on live TV. If he did it in another country, that's what would happen. If a foreigner came to America and did the same thing he was doing outside the debates, he will be charged in a intelligence court. Not a criminal court, but it's an intelligence thing. I don't know if I've talked about that court or not, but yeah, you'd be like, well, you're infiltrating the government. You're using symbolisms. You're using values of American public to get the majority on your. Either you're trying to get the majority on your side, or you're trying to create a movement of those who see those values on your side to run a coup or whatever you're trying to do, and it's becoming suspicious. And so yeah, outside the debates. It's just how this world works, at this current moment, and it's just a lot of stuff is happening all at the same time. And if you look at it, a lot of stuff is happening, but we don't get the full story. We don't know the full story. But if I have to twist and undo the twisting of like the American tariffs, for example, then you could debate, well, is the twisting justifiable? Is it truth or is it less truth? I mean, it's a matter of perspective. But I mean, the reality is it true or is it not true? Is it actually happening or is it not actually happening? It's not a debate. We don't have the information coming out from the outside world. It's just a bubble that we live in, and we're realizing that bubble even outside of YouTube. Like I mentioned before, it's beyond YouTube. It's just who we are, and this channel might be a pioneer in that. But you know, it's just nature. So guys, I'll end it here before I ramble on too much, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.